Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. This episode is brought to you by Lightspeed Venture Partners. Lightspeed is a globally leading venture capital firm with over $29 billion in capital under management and more than 500 investments across the US, Europe, and Asia. With its dedicated gaming practice, Lightspeed Gaming, the firm is investing from over $7 billion in early and growth stage capital, making it by far the largest fund focused on gaming and interactive technology. Lightspeed's team combines deep expertise in gaming with a global multi-stage investment platform and a culture that truly puts founders first. Selected investments include Epic Games, Snap, and Stability AI, as well as game designers and producers who led the creation of titles like Fortnite, Call of Duty, League of Legends, Valorant, StarCraft 2, and many more. For more information, simply go to gaming.lsvp.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Niko Vuori. Today, we have a very special episode. On the pod, we have a guest from one of the biggest gaming companies on the planet. Its games were played over 8 billion times last year, and it continues to release games beloved by tens of millions of players every week. I am talking, of course, about the New York Times and its head of games, Jonathan Knight. By now, I'm sure you all know how significant the games business has become to the Times, how much they're investing in it. And we actually are welcoming Jonathan back after about a year when he was last on the show, not long after the Wordle acquisition. And obviously a lot has happened since then. So I wanted to have him back to tell us how the games business has evolved, what the new slate of titles coming out looks like, what does it mean to build a thriving community around casual games at the Times, and of course, I want to vent about the streak mechanic in Wordle and how desperately it needs a streak freeze feature. It really does. I lost my 390-day streak when I flew to Amsterdam, and the time zone messed with my streak, and next thing you know, it was gone. So anyway, I wanted to get that off my chest and get it right to Jonathan. So anyway, without further ado, here to discuss the New York Times game strategy, I am thrilled to welcome back Jonathan Knight. He's a longtime gaming industry veteran, former colleague of mine at Zynga, and wanted to say welcome back to the show. Jonathan, thanks for being on the pod again.
Thanks for having me back. It's great to see you.
Awesome. All right, with that out of the way, let's get right into today's episode. So Jonathan, we had you on the show before, just over a year ago, but it was a while. So let's remind our listeners about your background. Tell us a bit more about your gaming industry career and how you landed at the New York Times driving their gaming strategy.
Well, I've been in computer and video games my whole career. I started out as a producer at a company called Interplay. I kind of worked my way up to become an executive producer, general manager, ultimately head of studios. I worked for big traditional game companies like Electronic Arts and Zynga, where you and I overlapped. And, I would say just building, launching, operating big games at scale with, branded IP or original IP. I've just had a fortunate career and worked on a lot of incredible properties with incredible people. And, a few years ago, I was approached by the New York Times. It was a little bit of a departure in a way because it's not a traditional game company, but they were really eager to build out their games business and had a really cool platform for games and an amazing brand. And, I could see they were on a really good path, and it's been a great move and I've been loving it.
Fantastic. The joke, which I'm sure you're well aware of, is that the New York Times is now a gaming company with a little side hustle in news. How long before you take over overall leadership of the Times, given the growing importance of games?
Well, I think, it's funny, but the reality is that it's the strategy working. The strategy of the company is to be the essential subscription for curious people seeking to understand and engage with the world. We consider news to be at the center of what we do, and it is, and it always will be. But the deliberate strategy is to have sort of this constellation of standalone lifestyle products, whether it's games, cooking, Wirecutter, The Athletic, and the fact that games is a kind of a world-class product in its own right, but also plays a major role in the overall bundle strategy for the company. For us, it's just, it's the strategy working, and it's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, I know you don't break the numbers out, but I was, looking at your subscription numbers and digital content. I think the games belongs in there. Very impressive growth rates over the last, probably couple of years. When did the Times decide that this was something they wanted to invest in heavily? Obviously, they've had the crossword forever, 1940s, I want to say, and a couple of other games as well predate you as joining the team. What's been driving that subscription revenue growth? What's been driving the digital content, i.e. gaming growth for the Times? Is it new titles, or is it just more engagement from existing subscribers?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right. Yeah, we've had this idea since 1942 when we ran the first crossword puzzle in the paper. And I think, I was looking back over the history recently, and 1996 was when the company launched its first website, nytimes.com. And at that time, we had a digital crossword puzzle and a digital crossword subscription offering at the very same time that the news went digital for, with its website. So it's sort of been there all along, I would say. I think around 2018 with the launch of Spelling Bee, and seeing that Spelling Bee with its own kind of custom paywall and its sort of free-to-play model was stacking subscriptions on top of the crossword subscription. And you could sort of see the share of subscriptions coming, from the crossword growing. Share of subscriptions coming from Spelling Bee was growing, and the overall subscriptions were growing. That's when I think the company felt like, okay, we have a games opportunity here. It could be more than just the crossword puzzle. And since then, it really has been powered by content. And, it's a story as old as time, but content's king. And when we launch new games, that's sort of like probably the single biggest lever we have for growth and new audiences. And new audiences obviously translates into the subscription funnel for us. So with the acquisition of Wordle in 2022, we just had like a massive propellant to that strategy. We were sort of worried, how would we follow that up? Big shoes to fill. We launched Connections last year, homegrown game, and that was thrilling for the team, following the acquisition of Wordle, to sort of have a home run out of this, the team. And we just saw continued growth there. We're also seeing like the games app, the Dark Times Games app, becoming, a way bigger funnel for new users than it ever was before. But again, that has been powered by the games themselves. Wordle, Spelling Bee, Connections, that's what people are searching for. That's why they're coming to us. And then we think we've got a great product, which, I talk forever about, that keeps people and retains them. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's the games.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. We actually have planned questions on most of those things. The app, in particular, that was brand new when we talked to you, or not brand new, but it was fairly new when we talked to you last year, and it sounds like it's really been growing quite a lot. But I did want to ask, so if I just want to clarify, the strategy really is to have, this is maybe not the exact right word, but multiple hooks for subscribers to potentially subscribe. So they're doing the free content, they're doing the free games, there's a new game launching, they haven't subscribed yet. Suddenly it's like, oh, well, this is one that I actually do want to subscribe for. Now they subscribe. So it's kind of, you mentioned there's like kind of layering in the ability to get people at different moments, depending on what they care deeply about. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. And we have what some people might call a little bit of an unorthodox access model to games. It varies from game to game. And ultimately, the daily crossword puzzle, the full Spelling Bee experience, these are our premium sort of subscription-only games. But I would say that, like, increasingly what we're seeing is that the strategy is like, use the free games to get people to try, and offer like stats and streaks and sort of metagame features as a way to prompt registration. Like, if you don't create an account with us, we're not going to be able to, store your stats and show you all that. And then the archives, and we're rolling out the Wordle archive as we speak, but we've seen this with the crossword and with the mini, and now with the Wordle archive, that becomes a real strong subscriber value. So, for our subscribers now, they've got over 10,000 crossword puzzles on their phone, going back to 1993. And you can binge those, play them at your leisure. And, that's just a big part of the value, in addition to, of course, getting a new crossword puzzle every day. And so that increasingly is becoming the strategy. We've got Connections archive in development now. And I think, that's what you'll see going forward for all of our major games. To more or less, the daily puzzle is free. Register to get metagame features and then subscribe to get all of the content, going back for X number of years. There'll be some subtleties in there and some differences. Spelling Bee, I think, is a great model where it's a little more free to play. You get partial experience, you get full experience if you're a subscriber. There's a free trial on the app. So there's some different layers to the access model, but we're just finding that subscribers really value content, and that's not a surprise.
Well, content is king. We've known that across many industries for a long time now. So not surprising, perhaps, that's the case. As you recall from Zynga, we had a very, in retrospect, perhaps not quite as sophisticated as it could have been, but we had a fairly robust cross-promotion strategy. When a new game would launch, we would make sure that everybody was coordinated, and all the different games would point towards the new game, especially the higher affinity ones. And you'd have a big pop of users on day one, or whatever day we decided it was ready, stable and had all the features and set. Is there something similar at the times? I'm an avid, I play Wordle, I play Connections, I'm playing the new Strands in beta as well. Play all of them pretty much every single day. But I have yet to really see, at least on my end, a kind of a concerted push to move me from one product to another, or say, because you like this, maybe you'd like this too. So curious to hear, how do you think about it internally, this cross-promo strategy? Is there something similar to what we used to have at Zynga, where we push players from one product to another, especially the higher affinity ones?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd say is that our scale now is a real competitive advantage that we didn't have even just a few years ago. And that has reminded me a lot of Zynga. With Strands, we wanted to do kind of a small, quiet, open beta, just to get a read on retention. And I would say within a couple of days, we, had 7-figure users, and there's just no keeping it quiet. So, we can now safely get anything we want to do in front of millions, if not tens of millions of users in very short order. And that reminds me a lot of that competitive advantage we had at Zynga. We could launch a Facebook game and it would instantly go to number one and instantly have millions of DAU, because all we had to do was just put a pop-up in Farmville, and that was the end of it. And then you sort of go okay, well, that's a powerful weapon. We want to use it responsibly. And but I think the stage we're at now is when we launch new games, what we saw, I would say, very specifically with Connections, the number one referral source for Connections was Wordle. I should actually say number two, the number one source was search, as there's just so much organic demand and search for our games. But the number two referral source was Wordle. With Strands, the number two referral source was Connections. And we're just seeing the new games just kind of build on top of each other that way. As for sort of moving you from game to game and cross promotion, I think, we're not a traditional game company. I think that's why people are really responding to what we're doing. We're very respectful of people's time. We're not trying to get you to spend all day in our app. We don't want 24/7 engagement. We don't want to funnel you into things that you don't want to do just so that we can get more engagement. That's why we really like the design of the app. It's very clean. It's very elevated. The games are all there. You can choose which ones you want to try and which ones you don't. Sort of think users are smart enough to do that. On different surfaces, like on mobile web browser, you can be a little bit lost in terms of how did I get here and where am I going next? And we want to help those users with navigation and discovery. And with the Wordle audience, we have found that showing them Spelling Bee is a really powerful kind of pathway. And I think you will see us, methodically experimenting with that sort of like next action post game. But philosophically speaking, yes, 2+ game usage is an important metric for us. People that are playing 2 or more of our puzzles tend to just get more value and retain better in the long run. But we don't want to like overdo it, right? I don't want to push you into a game that you don't like just for the sake of it. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, I mean, it resonates very strongly. A lot of what you just said there is I've been playing Wordle. So the Times crossword is too hard for me. The mini is fine. I can do that. But the Times crossword is too hard for me. It takes too much time. And time is the one resource that we don't have any more of than anybody else on the planet. We have 24 hours in a day and that's it, right? So what I really like about Wordle and Connections, which is part of my morning ritual, is I can get through Wordle and Connections in just a matter of minutes. But it's just a really nice kind of brain stimulant, gets me going, kind of like a cup of coffee almost, right? And I've started playing Strands, but I'm actually interestingly finding that maybe we can geek out on the design there, but I don't know if you're going to change the design much, but the hint feature, if I may give you a piece of feedback, the hint feature doesn't feel quite right to me. I almost prefer it to be gone entirely so that I have to kind of figure it out for myself. Well, if you hit the hint feature, it's so easy to get the simple words, right? Like you can collect more than you need to do the entire puzzle. Now, you're only cheating yourself, of course, and it does feel like cheating, quite frankly. But yeah, when you hit that hint thing and it shows you the word, it's like basically that's game over right then and there, right? What's really nice when I find myself having the most fun with it is when I don't hit the hint feature at all and I figure it all out for myself. And that feels really quite satisfying. So anyway, geeking out on game design a little bit, but like that's the one thing where that's why I don't go back to it as often as I do with Wordle and Connections, because they feel really pure in terms of how you solve them. Whereas with the hint feature, it feels you kind of dirty yourself a little bit. I know you're only cheating yourself, but nonetheless, that's what it feels like. So anyway, my 2 cents there. But what I like about all of these games, including Strands, is it's they're quick. They're easy to do. Yeah, you just spoke to that as well. It's a remarkable feat, I think. If you think about, they're essentially hyper casual games, right? If you were to describe these games, they're casual or hyper casual, maybe not quite hyper casual. And I don't think there's anybody else on the planet who actually has a subscription business around casual or hyper casual games. So it's a quite unique position that the Times occupies in that sense. Do you often think about that yourselves and say like, well, how on earth did we manage to build a, tens of millions of people, 8 billion plays last year, apparently 5 billion came from Wordle, a subscription business around this casual type of gameplay. It's a really remarkable feat, actually. And I don't know if you guys reflect upon it internally, but I'm just calling it out here because I look at it and say, wow, this is quite special and it's quite unique.
Well, thank you for saying that. And yes, we do reflect on it. If there's one thing that the New York Times is good at, it is reflecting upon things. That is a big part of our culture. And you're right. And I think the reason there's a few reasons why it's working. And number one is that we have human-made puzzle content every single day. We've got an incredible team of constructors and editors, and the crossword is sort of, crowdsourced in a sense of like we get a few hundred submissions of crossword puzzles every week, and we sort through them and edit them and really choose the best of the best. And all of our other puzzles are human-made, and there's one puzzle a day. And you're sort of in this very interesting relationship between solver and constructor. You can kind of almost, as a solver, you sort of know there's another person like right behind this puzzle that's trying to trick you, and they've decided what the answer is, and you're trying to sort of like figure out what's in their head in some ways. And that's just like, yes, you can call it a hyper casual game or a puzzle game, but the human-made component is pretty unique to what we do, and it's a big part of our heritage, as a newspaper. And sort of like we have writers, we have editors, and we have a lot of like rigor and testing that goes behind, the content that we're putting out every day. And it's like our stamp of quality and it's our brand. So I think that's in part why it works. But because of the model, like, hey, for the cost of the Starbucks every month, you can get all this incredible human-made content every day, a very elevated app experience without a bunch of like bullshit around coins and treasure chests and pop-ups and power-ups. And we're not monetizing the core loop. We're not trying to create some sort of like pay to win or pay to get an advantage. It's just more elevated than that. And it is a really kind of like I see it as a bit of a slow moving, innovator's dilemma in a way. I would like it to be faster moving, but I'm impatient and want to go faster. But it's still this like, I see other, traditional mobile free-to-play apps and studios in the word space. And I know they're looking at us with great frustration. Like, how are you able to not do any of those sort of like hated mobile free-to-play tactics that other studios have to do to just squeeze every last cent out of their users because they're in this arbitrage game around user acquisition, LTV, and we're just not doing any of that, and we're getting incredible amount of organic, inflow of users and great subscriber retention, great conversion, and it's all working. But I think it starts with the human-made content. It starts with our respect for people's time. We sort of talk about it as time well spent, and then this kind of clean, elevated UX.
Yeah, this connection between puzzle maker and solver is actually a really interesting one. I know it started, of course, with Will and the crossword originally. I mean, he's legendary. Everybody knows him by name. And I think Tracy Bennett does the Wordle. So I've never met her. I don't know what she looks like, but I know she's in your team, and I know her name because I do the Wordle every day, right? And I'm actually embarrassed to say I've forgotten who does connections, but she's great.
Winaloo.
That's right. Sorry. Yes, Winaloo. Thank you for reminding me. So I recognize her name too. And so this idea of having a connection, like a human to human connection, even if you don't know the person, but you put a name on it, is really interesting. And it actually taps into something that I know as I was researching this episode, I noticed you've used the word community quite a few times in interviews, media coverage, and in stories. And you're kind of, I think, alluding to some of that here as well. So I'm very interested to hear, what do you mean by the word community and building this community of players? Because your games aren't traditionally social, air quotes, right? There's not clans. There's, you're not sending invites to other people. If there is any kind of playing together, it's pretty much offline play, right? Like it's just you sitting with your family or friends at the kitchen table, having breakfast together, things like that. So there's no overt social, and yet it does feel social in an interesting way. And you have used this word community quite a few times, especially over this last year. So I'm very interested to hear, how do you think about community? How do you talk about it internally with the team? And how are you tapping in to essentially social without the features that you typically associate with that in a product, in a game, on mobile or elsewhere?
Yeah, I think there's two big streams there. One is our forums, which we host kind of first-party forums. I mean, obviously there's activity out in, the internets around Reddit and everything, like people are, creating Facebook groups, or, there's places where people are gathering that we're not in control of, but we have made it central to what we do to have kind of first party hosted forums. The Spelling Bee forum is our most popular, and that we see that as a place for like our most dedicated solvers to come for tips, tricks, hints, ways to get better at solving, and to talk to each other about like their solution that day or whatever it might be. And so they're coming together in those forums, and from a business perspective, we do see, we get great ad revenue from those forums. We see a lot of strong correlation between visiting forums and playing the game, propensity to subscribe. We see like great subscriber retention from users that are both playing the game and visiting the forum. So we know that it's driving value, and it's also just core to who we are to try to help solvers be better, and get better at solving our puzzles. So that's one, and that started with Wordplay, which is the crossword forum. Spelling Bee forum has been wildly popular. We have a Wordle forum called the Wordle Review. We have the Connections Companion. I would say they're like, all of those things it's a little bit lumpy in terms of how they're surfaced and the discovery and access to those pages from the games themselves. And a lot of people don't know they exist, or they find them, in sort of a circuitous way. But that's one big thrust. But the second one is really, which Wordle kind of led the way on this, but Wordle, Connections, we're seeing it with Strands, Spelling Bee. These games are social without having social features built into them, but the social is playing out in the group chats, where our users have sort of like self-organized, and anyone out there who's in like a passionate Wordle group like I am knows that like that is the place where you're posting your score every day, And, we're living basically rent free, thanks Mark Zuckerberg, in that space, and not having to build chat because the chat's happening there. We're not having to build a leaderboard because people are, competing with each other in that space, where we don't have to have, even for those people, don't even have a push notification or remind that their friend played, because like the group chat is that push notification. So it's kind of cool. And we see that we kind of think of that, that group chat as like literally the other half of the product experience. Like I almost think of that as my surface, even though I'm kind of renting it from WhatsApp. So yeah, it's surprising. Our games are surprisingly social, and they're just playing out in different spaces. And then people are ultimately coming back to us the next morning.
Yeah. And it's really, so I've never actually been to the forums, and I have to confess, I didn't even know you had them. So to your point about entry points, like that might be something to consider, given that I actually did research this, and I'm an avid player, daily player there. I don't know if I'd actually participated in the forums, but nonetheless, I didn't even know they existed. But for me, the social, really, the most fun social is actually the one that plays out in the real world. Whether it's at the kitchen table with your kids, them helping you, or my kids are big swimmers, so we go to swim meets all the time, and everyone's bored there. So you're doing connections, you're doing Wordle, and everyone's kind of pitching in and helping out. And it's a really, there aren't that many, it's almost like a board game in many ways. I don't know if you ever consider it that as an analogy for you guys, but it feels like it's a board game that you can play with, anywhere from 2 to 8 players almost. Like that's kind of how it feels, like the in real life component of it. And in a way that most other games, or very few games, I can really point to. Is that part of the design philosophy? How do you design games? I mean, that's where I'm going with this. How do you actually sit down and think about this from the ground up? Like, how do you create that magic it's a completely blank slate. There's a gazillion word games out there. Like, there's so many word games out there, and yet you are able to put a fresh twist on it seemingly time and time again. I mean, at least with Connections, following on Wordle's heels, and now Strands, which I can definitely see becoming bigger, coming out of beta. Again, I don't know if you're going to fix that hint feature, because that's going to be a deal breaker for me, I think, long term. but nonetheless, what's the design process at the times that gets you these hits, that gets you these games that really do feel part of a family?
It's a great insight about board games, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do agree with that. And you're right. Like, there's a strong tradition with the crossword puzzle going back generations. Shout across the room, like, what's a 5-letter word for European capital? Starts with a P, and you sort of like, and it's a little harder for us to kind of quantify that, in a classic sort of product management sense. But we do think that's part of the organic nature and part of the multi-generational aspect of our product, which, increasingly we see as like a real strength. And we're in this for the long haul, like we absolutely think we're building a 100-year product or a forever product. But, yes, like that works its way into the aesthetics, the idea, and we talk about that internally, that our games sort of have their tradition and root in sort of paper products and sort of printed physical products. And there is a kind of a board game vibe. And so we kind of want that to come through. And that's part of why the UI and UX in our games is so kind of like 2D and simplistic and elegant. And so I think, increasingly we're sort of, with the more games we have, the more we want to like really recognize that and internalize that. As far as like our new game, I don't want to like give away the whole store there. Like, we do think we have, a somewhat repeatable process at this point for creating new games. But as you well know, people are fickle, and like trends come and go, and like it's entertainment. You can never quite know what's going to work. And so we do develop a lot of prototypes and a lot of concepts internally that never see the light of day. And we have, what you might imagine is sort of like a stage gate process, green light process of like getting a lot of things into the funnel, and then having checkpoints and validation points where we can kill stuff that's not working, and making sure that we don't get too married to something that, I get very passionate about our games, and like I believe in them, and I get hooked on them, and I think everybody in the world's going to love them. But, we're trying to make games that appeal to, the most amount of people, and that are going to have great retention. And so, as you might imagine, we sort of like kill a lot of things. We get to a stage where we can ultimately get stuff in front of real users. We start with, user testing. We start internal, then we go external. We'll do focus groups. We use online tools like Discout, and we like interview people, and we just sort of building a case as we move our games through that funnel, for continued optimism, conviction, validation. Ultimately we put things out web only, web first, just to see, if it takes off, and then we're measuring retention, on a much bigger scale, and then we've got some success metrics, and we killed digits, which was our numbers puzzle that I really loved, and a lot of people love it, and a lot of users love it, and sort of were upset with us when we took it down, but it didn't quite meet the bar. And then Connections came along and exceeded that bar, and so did Strands. So I think we have a healthy mix of intuition, brand values, like kind of know what works. We have certain filters. I've talked about a few of them, human-made puzzles, time well spent, the social aspect of it, the sharing, the sort of board game vibe. And then, we start putting that through a more data-centric process, until we get to something that's working. So, yeah. And we've got a couple things coming up the pipe that I'm excited about, so we're not done yet.
Oh, well, it's clearly working. I alluded to some of these numbers earlier. I think the numbers that you shared for last year was 8 billion plays, of which Wordle was 5 billion. I have to believe Connections, and again, games are very subjective. So who knows if I'm, if everyone else is as passionate about Connections as I am. I really like that. I almost like it better than Wordle in some ways. So, how do you, I know you can't share like what the numbers are going to be for 2024, but you can probably talk about trends here a little bit about, you've talked about stacking and layering these games on top of each other. 8 billion plays is a lot. Like, where do you go from here? Like, is it just growth upon growth? Is it rocket ship, or is it more of a kind of a steady as she goes like growth? And it's more about the layering and not about the explosive rocket ship. How are you guys managing growth, essentially? Let's ask that question. How do you manage growth at this kind of scale when you're in the billions in terms of play sessions? And I think you've shared tens of millions of weekly players.
Yeah, look, we want to keep growing. We want to keep growing our subscriber base and ultimately contributing profits to the company that help, secure the independence of our journalism and, protect the mission of the company. So like that's at the highest level, sort of what gets me out of bed in the morning. And to do that, we need to keep growing audience. We need to particularly keep growing the sort of the top of the funnel, that what we call the non-subscribed WAU, because that's sort of our convertible audience, right? So we're pretty focused on that. And then once we do sort of like get an anonymous user to register, ultimately subscribe, we're focused on subscriber retention, churn, starts, stops, net adds. It's basically, we're kind of managing a subscription funnel. New games is sort of like a big driver of growth. App downloads is a big driver of growth. We have other aspects, in terms of like paid acquisition, brand marketing, owned and earned media, partnerships. Like there's a number of things we're pursuing to, continue to grow. And, I would say we're considerably bigger than we were this time last year. So we've seen like really significant both audience and subscriber growth. I think we shared recently, Meredith shared, as part of an earnings release, that we had 20 million weekly active users on Connections. Wordle's considerably bigger. So, these are big numbers for sure. I would say the number of users that are playing 2+ products has tripled year over year. I would say that our advertising revenue from games tripled year over year. We don't sort of break out subscriptions. We're part of the bundle as well, and we're increasingly driving a lot of bundle starts just from games. People are opting to take the full bundle, even though they're hitting a games paywall. So, it's a little bit, that's why we kind of roll it all up in the reporting. But, I would say subscription revenue from games is also way up year over year. So it's really, I would say, very exciting growth. And, we're optimistic and ambitious about the coming, few years.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I mean, definitely from the outside looking in, it does look like, it's just almost like success after success. I'm sure it's the sausage, when the sausage gets made, it's not quite as simple as that, but certainly, seeing connections, and like I said, I can see Strands probably is going to be another big one based on kind of what I'm seeing at least. But brings me to the app. So tell us more about the app. So the app was fairly new, I think, when we last spoke. Not brand new, but fairly new. And it sounds like it's really had a breakout year or breakout 12 months, give or take here. In terms, I saw it hitting number one in the App Store, the Apple App Store charts on multiple occasions, I think. And, I've seen people sharing about it, not just you.
Number one word game, number two overall.
Okay, all right. Little humility. You got a little word. Okay, fine. Who was number one then? Who do you have to beat to get up there?
I think actually we were, that week that we hit number two, I want to say it wasn't Monopoly Go. I think it was Call of Duty or something. But normally Monopoly Go is kind of occupying that spot.
Yes. Well, maybe we'll, for the foreseeable future, I seem to be playing the LTV cat game extremely effectively. That's a whole other episode right there. But yeah, so talk to us about the app, the kind of the thinking behind it, the launch, when that happened, kind of just the timeline, and then whatever you can share on how it's doing and how you think about putting content in there, since, for lack of a better phrase, the games. You already mentioned that you go web first and then you kind of determine, where next kind of thing. So yeah, tell us more about the app strategy, which I presume is a separate strategy to the overall game strategy.
I would say it's like increasingly important, and so sort of like a deliberate shift, and one that's been happening for the last couple of years, to more of an app first strategy for NYT Games. And to clarify, the crossword app launched in 2009. It was an early Editor's Choice award-winning iOS app. And what, it's kind of like what you're remembering is more like our rebrand of the app. It's like redesign and sort of, we started rolling that out to all users. We were testing it late last year. We rolled it out to all users at the top of this year. So it's sort of the completion of a kind of phased approach to like the full rebrand from crossword to games, which, we completed on web a while ago. We completed it a while ago in terms of like the commercial surfaces. Like, what am I subscribing to? You're subscribing to games now. You're not subscribing to crossword. But with the app, the downloads that we were getting from people searching for crossword on the App Store, so important. And we were really winning, in terms of like App Store search authority for the word crossword, that, we were very careful about just rebranding the app, changing the name of it, right. And then hurting that funnel. And so we were very careful. We tested our way into that. We were very careful. And in fact, we were very successful in making that transition from crossword to NYT Games, rebranding, changing the icon, changing all that store, the store assets, and really fulfilling the vision of like a portfolio of games, not just the crossword. The redesign of the homepage, was a year-long project that I'm really proud of, and I think it's very beautiful. And I'm happy to say that just a couple of days ago, it was announced that we're nominated for an Apple Design Award for 2024, and I'm going to be going to the mothership in Cupertino in about a week. Great honor to sort of be there for WWD, for the Worldwide Developer Conference, and for a special event around Apple Design Award nominees. So like super exciting and a big honor. And also the metrics have been really strong. Like we basically approached, and from Zynga days, and I remember like, hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying this, but like I screwed up Drop 7 when I was there, and people who worked with me at that time will remember. And I'm sorry, Mark Pincus, if you're listening, because he was right and we were wrong, and we took a beloved game and we thought we were doing something good, and we basically killed the game with a redesign. So when you redesign a beloved app, it's a very dangerous undertaking, and so we just thought, let's just do no harm. If we can hold metrics where they were, but then implement a redesign that allowed us to go into the future with additional games and sort of a new platform for content. But in fact, the metrics are like way better, and it's higher converting, and obviously better for 2+ games and some of the other things we care about. So huge success story there, along with bringing connections into the app and a bunch of PR we got in the first part of the year, as well as the 1,000th Wordle, which was a huge celebration. And the app is just like really taken off. When I took over the team in 2000, our app was ranked about number 425 on the top free iOS games chart. So to peak at number 2 from where we were a few years ago in the 400s was just like an incredible feat. And we've been sitting in the top 15 or usually top 10 free games on iOS all year long. And we're the number 1 word game. So it's just like, it's literally been staggering. It kind of surprised even me. And we did 10 million downloads of the Games app last year. That was up from 5 million the year before. And, I think we're pretty close to 10 million already this year. So I think we're looking to kind of double that again. It's been awesome. And we see that users in the Games app relative to mobile web, desktop web, et cetera, they're higher engaged. It's higher converting, and it's just, and it's a better experience, right? You can find the games more easily, and all of that. So yeah, like, I don't know what else to say. It's been like a success story.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear. Congratulations on the design award, and of course, all the success there as well. It sounds quite an exciting ride. I had a question here that was not planned, but it came up to me as we were talking. This many people downloading the app and, of course, playing the games, I'm presuming the vast majority of them are probably not New York Times news subscribers. So I'm wondering, and share as much as you can, because I'm very interested in this, if there's any metrics you could share around this. If let's say you do 20 million downloads of the app this year, let's just say that for argument's sake, like, what percentage of that would you hope to, or will you, or are you converting into news subscribers? I'm presuming you care about that, right? I mean, New York Times is, for all jokes aside, it's still, the New York Times, it's news. So while games, obviously, it's amazing that it's such a big part now of the business, and it's growing so rapidly, and it is time well spent. I presume there's some internal metrics or some internal conversations, at least, around how do we get some of these folks who are playing our games to actually become news subscribers too? Because I think news subscribers are probably the stickiest subscribers on the planet. Once you subscribe, I've had my New York Times subscription, I don't know how many years now, like forever. And I think all the news subscriptions that I'm subscribed to, but for digital newsletters, those I do subscribe and then unsubscribe if I'm not getting enough value. But news subscriptions, generally, people don't drop them. So very curious to hear what conversations happen internally. Are there any metrics you could share? How are you tracking success going from games to news, and any color around that?
I will say that we're experimenting a lot right now in this area and learning a lot. So there's probably not too much I can share because it's sort of fluid and dynamic, but you're on the right track. It's an area of great interest to us. And, with the games audience having really grown massively year over year, especially for the last 2 years, it's increasingly like an opportunity. And yes, a lot of the people that are downloading the app, they're coming for the games, and they're coming in and they may never have had a relationship with the New York Times. And we see that as like an awesome opportunity. Don't really have any specific numbers to share. The color I can provide is that we definitely see that for subscribers that engage with both games and news on any given week have the best long-term subscriber retention of any sort of like usage pattern.
Surprise.
So we know that combination, the news can come and go. The news cycles can be lumpy. There's all sorts of factors that go into news fatigue, news demand. But games is a daily habit, and so the combination of news and games is really, really powerful. We definitely think there's opportunity. There's so much that the Times has to offer that's not just, the war in Ukraine or the war in Gaza or Trump trial, right? There's just like an incredible amount of content that's lifestyle, that's culture, obviously like our cooking product, our other standalone products, and so, yeah, we do see an opportunity to introduce that kind of content to our audience who may have come for the games and didn't think themselves as like, news readers. So yeah, more to come there. It's definitely an area of focus and enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, 20 million download. I don't actually know what the current subscriber number for the news product is. You probably know this off the top of your head, but I've got to believe the 20 million significantly dwarfs the number of actual new subscribers the Times has. And so you must be looking at that and saying, like...
We have over 10 million subscribers at the enterprise level.
Got it. Okay. So 20 million downloads, though, that'd still be twice that. So there's obviously and if you can move that 10 million number by 10%, like that's a pretty huge lift, right? So so I can totally see why that would be a priority, and that's why it occurred to me to ask the question there. Now there is a point. I believe there's a saturation point for how many games you can play. Now you say you're tracking the 2 games a day. I'm sure you track the 3 and 4 and 5 games a day as well. But is there a saturation point for games like this? Or is it just it's a bigger offering? And so if I don't want to play Strands on a certain day, there's a new game coming, I'll play that instead, or do you hope to have players playing in multiple? I mean, you obviously want them in 2 because otherwise you wouldn't track that. So is there a world where you're like, look, we need that 2 to go to 3, or not need to, but like here's our path for doing it? Or do you feel like at some point we can't launch 5 games in a year? Like that's just too much, or even 1 game this year might be too much, or what? So I think that's the question I'm getting at here. You're at a sweet spot right now. You have just the right number of games, I feel, where it's like, I'm not going to play all of them, but I'm going to play most of them. And then once you push over the edge a little bit, it's like, oh God, there's too much there. Like there's too much choice. I can't play all these games. Doesn't mean you're going to unsubscribe, but I think it means the flywheel maybe starts turning a little bit slower. So curious to hear how you guys think about this, and how are you being deliberate about the product launch strategy, the new game strategy?
Yeah, I mean, such a great question. I think for the moment, the number of people who are saying there's too many games in the Games app is like massively dwarfed by the number of people that are saying, when is Strands coming to the Games app? So I don't think we're there right now. And it'd be a great problem to have, and I don't think we'll have that problem for a little while yet. But yes, there's definitely a point at which like our goal is not to have 20, 25, 30, 40 games in the Games app. Like we want to be a highly curated, human-made offering. And you can go to some of these sites where you just see like, tens of casual games, mahjongs and sudokus and solitaires, and it's just like a page of dozens of casual games, and that's not who we want to be. Our games are not a commodity. They're again, like curated, handcrafted, very special puzzles. And I think we have a high bar, and we'll have probably an even higher bar going into the future for a game to sort of make it to the major leagues, which is like to come to the Games app. So yeah, we're thoughtful about it. We think about it. We don't think we're there yet. But it's something we'll be tackling probably not too far down the road.
Yeah, fair enough. That's it. Yeah, like I say, a nice problem to have. If you get to a point where you've got so many quality games that people are saying like, yeah, you know what, I'm happy with what we have here. So, okay, I have a final question for you on the New York Times, and I have a more fun question. And then I know you've got a hard stop, so I'm going to respect your time here. But one thing I wanted to follow up on is you had announced some partnership deals a year plus ago. You had Delta Airlines, you had Hasbro. I think you had some others in the works as well. Now, obviously, your standalone success clearly is so good that you probably don't need to be doing these partnerships. But tell us more about how those went. Are you doing more? What is the strategy around that? Has that shifted from when we last spoke a year plus ago?
Well, we continue to be an important partner with Delta Airlines, and we're sort of the exclusive puzzle game offering if you connect for free Wi-Fi on Delta airplanes, and kind of bring up their portal on your phone and get that free Wi-Fi. And we're there alongside a couple of other major brands, and we're thrilled with that partnership. And we're excited to have that captive audience that otherwise would be able to maybe play the mini archive in offline mode, but otherwise a lot of our games require, internet access. And then you can also get the daily crossword, the full spelling bee experience, essentially, sort of subscriber entitlement if you're flying on a Delta plane and connecting there. So like, we're excited about that. We're continuing to to be a partner to them, and they've been a great partner to us. I don't have anything else to announce. I mean, I think we're, to your point, like only want to work with the best partners, the highest quality. I think if we identify a place where there's lots of users that we don't think we would otherwise be able to directly, get into a relationship with, and there's something we can do there that's a win-win. We're always looking at those things, and I working on a couple right now, just like nothing to announce. It's an important part of our strategy, but there's a very high bar, I would say, to doing a partnership like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, with that, I think we're coming towards the end here, but I do like to ask all of our guests, what 3 games are you playing at the moment, or are you most excited by? And you can't name your own. That's a rule we've had to come up with, because that's the first thing that every guest says. Well, I'm very excited for our upcoming game. So no, can't do your own games.
Well, I've been playing Wordgrams from Funcraft, and that's Jason McGurk, ex-Zynga, Michael Martinez, incredibly talented team there, and
great guys.
They're pretty close to what we do in some ways, and they're doing some things really, really well. And I like that Wordgrams game. It's just like a nice mashup. I would say I'm playing a lot of chess.com, but not necessarily competitively. I'm not really a great competitive chess player, but I like their chess puzzles. I think the chess.com app is excellent. I just think it's a really, really high quality app. And I think in a lot of ways, they're kind of an inspiration to us in the sense that they're one of the few. Chess.com and us we're kind of like maybe the only 2 sort of major game companies that are taking this approach, mission-driven, subscription model, focus on long-term value, long-term relationships, big focus on community. They have a big journalism aspect to what they do. And I really, really love that company, and I love that app. What else? Oh, I guess I would say, which is maybe not fair, I don't know what you're looking for, but I'm in a D&D group, and that's actually why I have a hard stop, because me and some of the other dads are in a regular D&D game, and that's.
I love it. I love that you said no, and that counts. Any game, whether it's tabletop or paper, pencil, mobile, console, PC, whatever. So, all right. Well, those were great options and choices, and quite different to our regular guests. So I appreciate you sharing those, and your taste in games are quite similar to mine, although I have never been a D&D player. So that's something that bypassed me and my childhood. To this day, I'm not quite sure how to play. So anyway, all right. Well, listen, Jonathan, it was so good to see you again. Great to hear the insights. Congratulations with all the success and all the growth and the design awards. I mean, it's just, it seems like a really exciting 12 months, which is why I wanted to have you on the pod today. So thank you again, and welcome back anytime.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to see you. I really appreciate it. That was a lot of fun.
Yep, absolutely. And always, big thanks to our listeners. We'll be back next week with more interviews, more insights, and more analysis from the world of gaming.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.